Today, we're slipcasting a ceramic dog. If you saw last month's video, part 1, if you haven't, check it out, where we made the 5-part mould for this. But I had a local artist reach out to me and ask me to produce a sample set of ceramic dogs in cobalt blue. I made a 5-part mould off a 3D print. So here I'm just putting the mould together and securing it with some shock cord. I do that so that the slip doesn't come pouring out all the sides of the mould. I talked about it a bit in the last video, where this mould is kind of all unique shapes and doesn't sit completely flat. So with this one, like, the shock cord is really important, otherwise it will just fall apart and all the clay will go everywhere. The cobalt clay that I used for this one is a custom mix that I had already available. So I'm just mixing up the slip to make sure that there's no clumps and it's quite thin and balanced before sieving it out. This cobalt blue is quite rich in tone, so it's really important to make sure that the pigment is quite balanced with the clay, otherwise it will be too thick. Just pouring the clay through the top of the mould in the 4 points that I had drilled in the last video from the mould. This one sat for a little bit longer than my normal casts, and then I just gave the mould quite a shake because the pore holes are quite tiny and I wanted the piece to be thicker. I wanted to ensure that the clay hadn't completely closed off and was very easily able to pour the clay out. Otherwise it would get stuck in the mould and then it would be a really uneven cast and quite thin at the top of the dog and quite thick at the bottom. Then after letting it drip, but before flipping it over, I just give it another shake to ensure that it does all come out. I've had previous casts with quite tiny pore holes or cast openings like this where the clay has gotten stuck. So I want to make sure that it's completely even cast before I start popping the mould open. I start with pulling out the top part of the mould, which is where the pore holes are. This is the point where all the extra parts of the mould actually click into. So if I was to pull the rest of the mould apart, it would just rip the piece apart. So I need to do it this way and then just trim where the pore holes are. Like, you can see where the openings are in the bottom of the feet. All of that could have been closed in if I didn't do that shake earlier or let it cast for too long. Then I just very gently pulled the mould apart, making sure that the piece doesn't get stuck in any points, because I was quite concerned when I did the 3D print that there were a few undercuts, but this cast came out perfect. Just needs a little bit of a trim where the mould spits together. But these are the small collection of pre-fired pieces ready to go. Just popping them in the kiln for a bisque fire first to ensure that they're ready for glazing and to ensure that there's no cracking, etc., that I was concerned about with the drying process. I'm just glazing these dogs with a clear gloss glaze. The client wanted a clear gloss glaze across the entire outside of the piece to ensure that it had this very glossy and vibrant finish on the dogs. Glazing like this though requires kiln stilts to ensure that the dogs don't sit with glaze on the kiln shelves. So this one was a little bit of a trick to firing. And this is one of my final samples. As you can see, the difference between the cobalt blue clay that I poured in and what it fired to, which is quite this dark, vibrant and rich tone of blue, coated in a clear gloss glaze. This particular one that I'm showing you does not have glaze on the feet because I wanted to give a sample that didn't have it to see the comparison. But this is the small collection with the final product for the client. Super fun and complex project to work on. This is exactly the type of client projects that I love. If you love this too, shoot me a like, subscribe. Thanks so much for watching and tune in next month.